Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras, bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Beha'alotcha, and this is a very significant chapter because we have the nation of Israel getting ready to go to the land of Israel. But beginning in this Torah portion in chapter 11, we see that things start to go wrong. That begins with a number of so-called minor sins, but ultimately leads us to what we will read about in next week's Torah portion, which is the sin of the spies, which will be the cause of the nation of Israel. Instead of immediately going into the land of Israel, they will wander in the desert another 38 years. Towards the end of chapter 11, chapter 11 itself, there is a sin of the nation where they come to Moses and they complain. They're not happy with the food. They're not happy with the manna. And in response to this complaint, Moses gets very, very upset. And indeed, he turns to God. Okay, he doesn't get upset with the nation. He is upset at the nation. But instead of talking to the nation and expressing his anger or frustration at the nation, he turns to God. And he basically is saying, what do I need this for? Why have you punished me to give me this leadership of this nation who doesn't appreciate anything, who, they have been the recipients of so many miracles and so many gifts from God, and yet all they can do is complain. And he basically turns to God. He says, I didn't conceive this nation. I didn't give birth to this nation. Why do I have to be responsible for this nation? And of course, we know that from the beginning, Moses did not want this job. When God first appeared to Moses at the burning bush, he really was trying to avoid this. He says, why me? I don't speak well. And this is really, I'm just an ordinary person. Leave me alone. This is not for me. But of course, God doesn't give him a lot of choice. And here we hear Moses' frustration after taking a job he doesn't want and putting himself in this job for 2 years very, very seriously. And he just gets to a point where he says in verse 14, I cannot do this any longer. I cannot by myself. I cannot carry this nation. It is too heavy for me. Okay? Now it's interesting because God actually here gives two responses. One is a response to Moses and one is a response to the sin itself. In response to the sin itself, God is going to send them an overabundance of quail, of meat, and that will have its own level of punishment. But what I want to focus on now is how he responds to Moses. And his response to Moses is, go and collect 70 of the elders of Israel, okay? And he's telling them, you're going to gather them together, and God says, I will speak with them. I am going to take part of the spirit that I have imbued you with, leadership, prophetic spirit, and I'm going to share it also with these other 70 people. And this, of course, is something that Moses is very happy about. And he gathered these people, and this actually happens, and God comes down, and he basically turns these 70 people into prophets. Now, once this happens, Joshua discovers that there are two people who, or actually somebody else discovers, there are two people that didn't come to the tent of meeting, 2 of the 70 that should have been there and didn't come, but they are prophesying in the camp. They didn't come to the tent of meeting. And Joshua, when he hears about it, his immediate response to Moses is, they're wrong, they should have come. What business do they have prophesying among the people in the camp? They need to come to the tent of meeting. And Moses' response is exactly the opposite. First, he calms down Joshua, he says, no. And what does he say to him? He says, I wish that every person in the nation would be a prophet. Okay? And I find that if you look at what this story tells us about Moses and about leadership, it is really an amazing story. We have here a leader that the last thing you can say about Moses is that he has ego. He is the most egoless leader, I think, that any of us have ever discovered. And indeed, at the very end of his life, the Bible tells us that Moses was a very modest man, and it's it's so right. It's so what Moses was all about. He was an extremely modest man. He never went into this leadership issue because he wanted leadership. On the contrary, he was always trying to run away from the leadership. And God chose him, I think, because he understood that leadership is not about ego or power, it's about responsibility. And in fact, when the responsibility became too great, Moses felt it was too great for him to bear, he asked God for assistance, and God gives him some prophets to help him out. And Moses is not threatened by this. On the contrary, he is pleased. And then when there's two more people, he's even more pleased. Oh, wow. And he says he wishes everybody would be prophets, because basically what he's saying is he wishes everybody would have this relationship with God, that they wouldn't need his leadership, but everybody then would be directed towards God, would do what God wants, and there would not be a need for Moses or for anybody else as a leader. And of course, that's a pipe dream. Human beings were created with flaws, and they need marshaling, they need leadership, and you're always going to have people who are sinning and who are making mistakes. And Moses understands this. Of course, God understands this, because this is how he made us. He made us as fallible human beings. But I think it's such a refreshing view of Moses and of leadership as a whole. This is what leadership should be. This is what leadership can be, if the leader actually is focused more on how he can serve the nation and how he can take responsibility for the nation, as opposed to what he can get out of this, what power and glory he can take out of this. And of course, that is not where Moses was at all. And I think it's something that we can all take inspiration from, and wish and pray that our leaders would at least try to be a little bit like Moses when they take on leadership. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.